Hey guys, what's going on? I'm Gino Manley, track day guy, amateur sports car driver, and on some weekends, driver of the number 85 AOA Racing Audi RS3 TCR LMS in the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge.
How and when did you get interested in cars?
Well, cars have been something I grew up with. My dad was in retail automotive, which is coincidentally what I'm in for a day job and profession. So I've always been around cars. Since I was a little kid, I can remember my dad bringing home new models of cars and just getting to play around with them. And obviously, if you like cars, it's not that big of a transition to get into liking racing. So my first motorsport passion was watching NASCAR, and I can still remember my first Daytona 500 growing up in Florida. Daytona is my home track, and I can remember going there and experiencing it for the first time when I was probably 10 or 11 years old.
How did you hear about track days, and what was your first track event?
So my journey into where I'm at now it's a lot that happened probably in a 5, 6, 7 year period to kind of where I'm at now. And I bought a car when I was 19, bought a Volkswagen Golf R32. It was a trade-in at the dealership I was working at, and I said, well, I have to have this car. And I heard about local autocrosses, so I took a leap of faith one day and signed up for an autocross out in Jacksonville. Our local SCCA region used to do autocrosses on a White House outlying airfield. So it was a little airstrip in the middle of nowhere outside of Jacksonville. And I started doing a bunch of autocrosses every weekend in that car, and from there the projection from autocross turned into me and a couple buddies from autocross racing in ChumpCar, which is now ChumpCar, and then kind of progressing from the amateur grassroots racing up to WRL and AER. But along the way, you kind of have to feel the need for fun. So I started doing a bunch of track day stuff and ended up doing 45, 50 events a year sometimes, from doing anything from local events at a track called The Firm in Stark, Florida, to some of the bigger venues, Road Atlanta, Barber, and places like that. I did most of this in a car I used for autocross. When I was autocrossing, a car you had to have was, there was a class called STF, Street Touring Front Wheel Drive. I don't even know if it still exists anymore, but the premise was you needed a small hatchback car. And in autocross, there's a handicap called the PAX, and you could buy one of these little hatchbacks like a Mazda 2 or a Fiesta, I think a Kia Rio, and if you autocrossed them and you did relatively well on your raw times, it would actually, the handicap would give you a good shot at winning overall. So I bought one of these cars when I was autocrossing and started doing a bunch of amateur racing stuff. So the car kind of sat when I got out of autocross, and kind of brought it back one weekend, and from there it just turned into me taking that Mazda 2 to tracks all over the country really, and just trying to get as much track time as I could on any given weekend.
In your Winding Road article, you said, to be completely honest, that little car is the only reason I've made it this far. Talking about the Mazda 2. Care to expand on that?
Yeah, so, you know, it's funny, I can say with certainty, you would never see me driving half the cars I do today. Certainly wouldn't be an IMSA if it wasn't for that little Mazda 2. And that car, if you're in the Southeast and you're in any type of track day or DE stuff, there's a good chance you know that car. And it's because for a good 2-year, 3-year stretch, this is an expensive hobby, but that car made it, I don't want to say it made it cheap, but it made it much more attainable to do a bunch of events. And so for me, it was pretty much every Saturday, Sunday, you would see that car at Barber, Road Atlanta, AMP, Charlotte, wherever there was a track that I could make it to and tow the car there in time, I would do it. But it gave me so much seat time. There's not many tools out there like that. Again, if I had a Corvette or a Camaro or something like that, the cost to run it would be so much that I couldn't afford to do it but a couple times a year. Whereas this one, I could buy one set of tires and it would last me, 6 months, and buy one set of brakes and it lasts me all year. But more so, it wasn't even so much the track time, that people respected what was happening, and I got to the point where I was so comfortable in that little car that I could really hustle it and just fling it wherever I wanted to go. More so, people started to recognize me in that car as, hey, that's that guy out there that's getting everything out he can out of that little 100 horsepower car. So, and that's what I mean by it. If it wasn't for that car, again, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Walk us through your progression through run groups in HPDE, and what was the moment or event that made you feel ready to be in advanced and start instructing?
Yeah, so my progression, and I think the DE track day ladder, here today we're out here with Max Speed Track Days, Phil and Dimple, great track day operators here in the Southeast. This is home. I mean, again, I try to be at a track day every single weekend if possible. If I'm not racing, I want to be at track day. So for me, this is the track day DE community's home, and I think the progression that you see your friends and even myself make, kind of one of the more rewarding things. When I first started, I can remember running all the way from the classroom groups. I did a couple classrooms with NASA, and then moving on up through the novice and intermediate ranks of a bunch of groups in the Southeast. And I really don't know when I made that switch, and I think for everyone, they're gonna know when it is. And my recommendation would be get with a group that becomes home to you. For me, it's Jay Zilla Track Days out in Atlanta. Get a group, and if you're new to this, sign up for a beginner and run in beginner until you feel comfortable and your instructors feel comfortable that you're ready to move on. Then move on to intermediate. Every group has a slightly different ladder, but my recommendation is go out there, and when you're comfortable to move on to the next one, and utilize the community, utilize the instructors, and you'll make a lot of friendships out here. So it's a great question. I don't even remember the first time I did an advanced day was because I've done so many, but even today, as many days as I've done, it's still not uncommon for me to jump into a lower group. And so people think that when you get checked off red, you always have to run it. There are times I run a lower group, and wherever you're comfortable in that day is what I recommend you do.
So obviously you started hot and heavy doing like 50 a year. So would you pretty much advance in like 6 months?
Yeah, so for me, I advanced pretty quickly because I was doing so many days and getting so much seat time, but it's different for everybody. I think the comfort level is the number one thing, and people think that it's about being fast. It's not. It's more about having a comfort level. Nowadays, I have the privilege, something I really enjoy, of leading a classroom and instructing with one of our groups, and that's my number one thing. Is it's not about going fast. Going fast comes with being comfortable. So you need to be comfortable, you need to have awareness on it, and there really is no rush to advance quickly. Now, some guys feel like they want to go up quicker into advanced groups, and that's okay if they have the skills ready. But again, you really got to rely on the group around you, rely on your instructors, whatever group you're in. And even for me today, again, I've done some pro racing now, and I've done track days just about everywhere. I always, whenever I have an opportunity, get somebody to right seat with me. If somebody that I know has certain skills that I don't have or are better than I am, they right seat with me. I pick their brain as much as I can. So this community and running track days and DEs, it's very rewarding. There's no time limit on this stuff. That's part of the appeal of it, is you're always learning. Even for guys like me and guys that have way more skills and experience than I do, it's always about learning.
What are your personal track cars?
So my personal track car collection, I kind of have a problem. So everyone knows me from my green Mazda 2. That's the Gino car. But I also have an NB 1999 Miata that I used to autocross that is now kind of like just one that's in the fleet. I have an E46 BMW ZHP that I've tracked quite a bit, so that's another car that I have a lot of enjoyment from. Still have my two chump cars. I have a 1986 Golf Mark II that maybe makes 80 horsepower. I have a 1995, I think it is, NA Miata chump car that I still have possession of, so that's kind of the core of the fleet. Nowadays, I'm super lucky. I don't really, it's kind of sad, but today is one of the first days I've driven the Mazda 2 in like a year, because my team I'm with, AOA Racing out of Atlanta, we run 9 NCMX5 Cup cars, the Audi RS3 TCR that I drive in IMSA, and the BMW M2 CSR, some of the cars we have as far as the race team. So I'm super fortunate I get to drive those cars, I have access to them whenever I need them. And then also too, just more so in the track day stuff, I've made so many friends here. Even today I was just driving my friend Mark's Hyundai Veloster. I can go to a track day now, and because I've made so many good friends here, and the people are just so generous, you could show up to one of these, not have a car, and probably end up driving. Just because everyone here is so gracious.
How long into your track day journey did you start racing, and what was your first racing series?
So my journey into actually wheel-to-wheel racing and track day stuff was a little backwards. So when I started autocrossing, I was really hot and heavy into autocrossing, and I was going to events every single weekend towing my car, and I made some friends there. And back then, this is 5-6 years ago, ChumpCar, which is now turned to ChampCar, was really a big thing. And so we're like, well, maybe we should try this. It's inexpensive. The premise was $500 race cars. And one of the guys I was autocrossing with, a good friend of mine, said, hey, I've done a couple of ChumpCar races. I know where there's a car for sale. And so me and 3 or 4 friends, we strapped our cash together and we went and bought this 86 Mark II Golf. And we started doing ChumpCar for 2-3 years. Ended up buying a Miata because we were doing, and it was just 3 or 4 friends. We threw a team together. Our parents would crew for us, and we did 5-6 events a year. We did Daytona, VIR, the 24, and eventually, like most things, we all kind of grew up, and so one of my friends took a corporate job in Charlotte. My other friend kind of moved on to bigger things in his career, including myself, and it just became hard to run the team. You couldn't get together every weekend. So to kind of take the edge off, I took the Mazda 2 back out of storage that I used to autocross. I can still remember after 2 years of sitting, I think it was, the car hadn't autocrossed in a long time. I took it out to the Firm, which is a small track in Start, Florida, and did a track day there, and kind of started having a lot more fun doing these. It took the edge off of not being able to race, and started my trend of tracking that car everywhere. And then doing that got really involved with the track day community, and so for me, this is home. Even today, I still identify as a track day guy first, not a race car driver or amateur race car, pro race car driver. I come from the DE community, so that's where my roots are. And just going back and doing a bunch of track days, I found my way back into racing, and started racing in a series called AER, American Endurance Racing. I drove a E34 BMW 5 Series for a season, a team called AutoWorks Motorsports, and then from there on kind of found my way to a local Atlanta team because I was running so much in Atlanta called AOA Motorsports, now AOA Racing, and that really kind of took off probably in the past 2 years to now I'm on TV. So,
how did you get involved with racing in the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge?
Yeah, so that's a long story, but basically, and it really goes kind of all the way back to the Mazda 2, and it's kind of a roundabout way. One of the groups I became really involved with, and I consider my home group now, is a group in Atlanta called J-Zilla Track Days. It's owned by a gentleman named James Marcellano, who has become probably one of my best friends. And I started running a bunch at AMP, Road Atlanta with them in the Mazda, and made a bunch of friends and connections there. And one of their marquee events is called Charlotte Under the Light, and they're like, hey, you've got to come do this event. So loaded up, went to Charlotte, probably the coolest track day there is out there. It's a track day that begins in midday and ends under the lights, and I got to run it the second year they did it, which was 6 months before NASCAR ran the roll for the first time. So I got to run it before they did, so that was pretty cool. During this event, there's a kind of a marquee photo that got taken back when the front stretch used to have a really aggressive chicane at the Roval. I found out that, you know, slow, low horsepower car, I got to keep speed up through here. So I figured if I touched the left curb and then just barely bounced off the right curb, I could create enough slip angle to go through it without basically lifting. And so that's what I did. I'll never forget, under the lights, I really got into this rhythm, making good time. And after the session was over, I came back in, and a photographer friend of mine, Chad Burdett, who used to be our track photographer, he's moved on to being a big YouTube star now. He ran over and I was like, oh no. He had his camera in his hand. I said, this means something's dragging from my car, or there's an issue with something. He's got a photo of it, he's gonna show me to me. He runs over to my window. I didn't even take my helmet off. He turns the camera around, and there's this shot of my car probably 2 feet off the ground, it seems like. And it was awesome. It was like frozen in time, the right side of the car levitating. And so anyways, what ends up happening is this photo goes viral in our track day community there. And it gives me this reputation of always being on 2 wheels, or it represented something cool, that here's a guy with a regular 100 horsepower economy hatchback, and he's just thrashing it, getting everything he can out of it. James loved it so much that he made this joke that I'm gonna make a t-shirt out of this, and I always thought, you know, haha. One day I was at work in a meeting and my phone was on the table and it just starts going off like crazy. It's messages, Instagram, Facebook, and I'm thinking, I wonder what's going on. Get out of the meeting, and sure enough, he created this into a t-shirt, which you can actually still go buy at the J-Zilla website. It's a green t-shirt, like the car, and there's an outline of the 2-wheel shot, and it says, this is Gino, be like Gino. And so that kind of gave me a little bit of some infamy in the track day community. How this goes back around is, so now people kind of know who I am, because there's a t-shirt about me and there's this shot, and maybe I can drive, I don't actually know, but hopefully I can. One of our later events, and this photo went around for a long time, and I started doing a bunch more events. It actually got me into instructing with the group more. I kind of became more so a spokesman for the group. And we were doing an event at Barber Motorsports Park. I'll never forget. There was a gentleman there named John DeBarros, and he'd always show up with these really nice NC MX-5 Cup cars. And he also raced IMSA himself, and he had his Continental Challenge Speed 3 that he used to race there. And James was like, hey, you should go introduce yourself to John. He wants to start doing some endurance racing. He's got those Mazdas. He just bought them from Skip Barber. He's redone all of them. And he's doing track day rentals, but he wants to go endurance racing. Go talk to him. You know a lot about that, because I'd already been running my ChumpCar team for a couple years, and I was racing AER at the time. And so I went and talked to John, and I was like, hey, you know, I'm so-and-so. And because I had this reputation of the shirt and everything like that, and my reputation in the track day group was pretty well known, he was like, here, take one of my cars out. Here's a brand new NC MX-5 Cup car. Give me your opinion on it. So at Barber, I took it around and said, hey, here's what I think you need to do to go endurance racing. He also let me drive his Continental Challenge Speed 3, which I thought was just wild that day. But yeah, I made a friend with John and didn't think anything was ever going to happen from it. A couple weeks later, he messages me, hey, I'm running Road Atlanta, the first WRL race there. I'm registering 2 cars, and here you have a seat, and I'll see you there. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll go run WRL with him. And this was 2 years ago, I think it was, a little over 2 years ago. And ever since then, I started running with him. It became pretty apparent at the time that I was one of the faster guys on the team. So started doing a bunch of WRL stuff, started doing a bunch of track day stuff with him, and every weekend now I try to be with him. And one day he always had this dream. He used to race Simpson himself a couple years ago. He always wanted to go back. He sends me a text message one day of a car, and it's just a car, and he says, listen, I did a thing. And he sent me a picture of this Audi RS3. It was the old E-Euro parts car. It was a very well-known car, and he actually went to New York and bought this car. And I never thought in a million years he'd actually let me drive the car. I thought he'd bought it to either race or to do something with. And so he brought it to Daytona International Speedway for our next WRL race, and we're gonna just run it as a test on the Friday test session. So he let me drive this car. I never thought he would let me do this. I'll never forget getting to actually get behind the wheel of that type of car and to experience it. And ended up driving the car at that test day, and I thought that was the end of it. And he had talked about racing the car, doing some more races with it. About 3-4 months go by, and he calls me one night and says, hey, listen, I want to take the car and run IMSA. It's still eligible. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's cool. You know, anything I can do to help you. I'll drive the truck, I'll change tires, I want to be a part of it. And this conversation goes on for like 10 minutes, and I don't realize that he's saying that I'm going to be driving. It was pretty cool that I was there from the beginning of the team when we started racing, and he knew I had some skill and some talent, but I think it was more so I was just very loyal to the team. I was there every week, and I was there to try to help our drivers out. And I think it was important to him that I was going to be behind that car. So we put enough money together. Miraculously, it's an extremely expensive endeavor to run pro racing. And thanks to the track day community, actually a lot of my sponsors, people like Haggerty, Crabapple Roofing out in Atlanta, actually James and Jazel actually crowdfunded a couple $1,000s to get me to be able to drive in that race. We did Petit Le Mans, did the Pilot Challenge race there. Somehow put enough money together to do the Sebring season ending last year at the 12-hour weekend. And then we just did Daytona and did the season opener there during the Rolex 24 weekend. So yeah, long journey, but again, just really, it's all started with that car. All started really from just trying to be here every weekend and do some track day stuff.
How'd your first season in IMSA go?
Yeah, so we did the final 2 races at Road Atlanta. It was different. First race at Road Atlanta, I was not prepared for how good those guys were. Again, I've done a bunch of amateur stuff. I wasn't quite ready mentally, I think, for that race. And actually, Petit Le Mans, that race didn't end so well for us. I actually had contact with another car, broken axle, and then ended up repairing it. We did finish the race. So I wasn't ready for how good those guys were. The next race we did at Sebring International Raceway, it was the season-ending Pilot Challenge race, same weekend as the 12 Hours of Sebring. The schedule last year got all messed up because of COVID. I was a little more mentally prepared there. Ended up finishing 7th of that race, which, again, we're a really small team. Most IMSA teams have, $1 million budgets. It's really us and a couple volunteer guys that go out and do this every weekend. So it's a cool story in itself that a small team like us can show up with a regular truck and trailer. We don't have a big semi truck and actually run these races. So felt much better at Sebring, got a little bit more up to speed. And then new season started this year, and so my dream to run Daytona and to do it in a pro level race was pretty life-changing. Petit Le Mans and Sebring, those are awe-inspiring also because those are your first kind of foray into pro racing. But to do it at Daytona where I grew up, to be on the other end of it was really weird. I'd gone to several Rolex 24s, several Daytona 500s, and to be on the other side of the fence and to come through the horseshoe see the Ferris wheel from the car, see all the fans. That was pretty special. And I actually had a good run. I had the opportunity to run Daytona with two friends of mine, a pro driver named Patrick Wilmot and another pro instructor. Guy I actually grew up racing ChumpCar with, named Andrew Pinkerton, who has actually been my race strategist for 3 races. And he got to drive himself, and we had a good run. I started dead last. Our transponder wasn't working in qualifying, and somehow through some pit strategy, by the end of my stint, we were running 4th. I was battling for 3rd at the time, and that was eye-opening. For me, it was kind of like, hey, I can run up here with these guys, and even though I'm not a professional driver, I don't do this for a living, I have enough skill, and really I think it was more about knowing that I had enough grit to not lose your cool and to go door to door with these guys at Daytona. And so that was probably one of the coolest experiences, the most fun I've ever had in a race car, was running Daytona and to be competitive and to actually be up there with the big names. So I was pretty proud to. Again, the whole weekend I was getting text messages from my Jay Zilla family and all my track day friends, and it was cool. Daytona was life-changing. It was a fun event. It was challenging in so many ways. We ended up finishing 7th in that race, which I'm pretty pumped up about. We had a couple of car issues towards the end, but we showed we were there to play, and I was proud. We did it on a budget that was minute compared to everybody else. My pit crew was all volunteers. My fire guy was a salesman at my dealership. My fueler was a guy named Johnny Chichowski, who just happened to be there as a spectator. He owns 9 Lives Wings. So yeah, cool event. I'll never forget it. And we'll see what's next. Again, they're so expensive. We'd like to try to do Watkins Glen. We're probably going to do Petit Le Mans again this year. And so just whatever comes about, and what we can get funding for through sponsors and things like that, we're going to try to make it work.
Kind of as you talked about, being on a small team demands a lot of drivers beyond being consistently fast. What were some things you had to do outside of the car to support the team operations during a race?
Yeah, so I never ever, it's not like my dream was to go pro racing. I kind of just stumbled upon this, absolutely a dream come true, but I never thought this would be in the cards for me. It's not something, most pro guys, they grow up racing karts and they go on to club racing. I kind of fell into this through the connection I made in the DE community. So for me, this was a little weird because, most guys, their intention is to go with a team and they're a race car driver and they get to go there and do their driving. Well, for me, it was a little different because since we're a small team and I still play kind of a team manager role, on the team, most people don't realize I was there for Petit Le Mans. Most drivers fly in for the Thursday event. Well, I was there Wednesday helping drive the car on the back of the rig, and I was there for registration. And I'll never forget this. I was up till 3 in the morning the night before my first ever pro session in IMSA, which was a Wednesday at Petit Le Mans. That was a test session. And I was up till 3 in the morning wiring the lights, the leader lights inside the car. That was me who was wiring them. Me and John were at the shop at 3 in the morning doing this. So I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world though, because I've gotten to see everything, not just the driving. I know more about everything now as far as registration on a car, getting through tech. And so I'm with the car the entire weekend, whereas most drivers get to qualify the car and they go back to the hauler. I was there the whole time. We didn't have an engineer at Daytona, for instance, so we kind of guessed on the setup ourselves. Me and the 3 drivers were like, or 2 other drivers like, well, I guess we should make this work, or I guess we should make this adjustment. So from doing it with a small team, for me, it's 100 times more work, but it's so much more rewarding because it's not just the driving I can be proud of. It's when the team's out there. I know I played a part in the, helping get that car there and helping set the car up and do a bunch of things there. So yeah, it's a lot more work, but I think it's way cooler and I think it's way more rewarding than normally.
I know you've won races, including American endurance racing. What are some of your preparation techniques before a race that you would say are great contributors to your pace?
I'm proud to say I've gotten to drive and race with a bunch of really quick, real pro drivers. I'm always right there with them, so that's always kind of rewarding when you know that you're right there with somebody. And so for me, it's a little different. I've never gotten the advantage of running a race school like a Skip Barber or a Bondurant. So everything for me is more self-taught. The number one thing I can say to guys, if you're a club racer or you want to go endurance racing like I'm doing, or even if you're a pro racer even, you're looking at it. I like to do a bunch of these events, we like to have fun, but I'm a big believer that there's no substitute for seat time, and that's in any car. I try to drive as many cars as I can, do as many tracks as I can, And so for me to come around here for a weekend, and yeah, I'm having a good time and with friends, but it's all the more rewarding because yeah, when I'm out there, I'm staying sharp. I think it's like almost like working out, just always constantly working your reflexes and being behind the wheel of a car. And I think that helps me a bunch versus guys that can only do, you know, a track day here, then they go race 2 weeks later. When you're always out and about, I think it's always more helpful to a racing situation.
What are some words of wisdom that you'd share with track day drivers looking to improve their driving skill?
If you're a track day driver and you're looking to improve, there is 1,000 different answers. People will tell you to buy data, people will tell you to get instructing, and there's no wrong answer. But my biggest thing is utilize the community. And what I mean by that is I can go right now to any of these guys that I feel like might be a little more skillful than I am and ask for help, and they'll give it to me. So don't be afraid to ask the guy next to you at your first track day, hey, I need some help, because in this group, in this community, people are always willing to help. So there's the technical tools. Yeah, you can go buy data recorders, you can buy Apex Pros or AIMS or things like that. You can certainly pay for instruction or coaching, but really there is no substitute for just asking for help from the guys around you. You guys will know who they are. If you're out there and there's a Miata and you're in a Corvette and he's passing you, go ask that guy, hey, would you right seat with me, or can I ride with you? And so leverage that doesn't cost anything, and I promise you'll learn so much from using those around you, and they're more than willing to help.
What do you see in your motorsports future?
So people ask me this all the time. What's the dream? And the, you know, the canned answer, of course, is the Rolex 24. You know, things like Le Mans. Is that really attainable? I mean, I don't know. Maybe so. I've made so many connections now that maybe 10 years, yeah, again, I could throw enough money together, maybe do the Rolex 24, which would be something that I want to do. But more realistically, I think that's the cool thing about motorsport is there's so many tracks I want to do. I'm known for doing a lot of track days, so there's still tracks in the US I want to do, and then obviously go to Europe. So I want to do more tracks. On the racing side of things, I'm determined to do Pikes Peak. I think that's something that's attainable for me to do. So I'd like to do that in a couple of years. I'd like to run the 25 hours of Thunder Hill. Even though it's not a pro race, I think it's just the marquee endurance race for a guy like me, for an amateur guy to get to go do that. So I'd like to do that. I'd like to run the Baja 1000. So for me, the dream is to do things that I think are attainable, and so that's kind of what I'm working towards all the time. But really, you just never really know in this hobby and motorsport where you'll end up. So again, you never say never to anything, but it's really just about getting to the next track day, getting to the next race event, and just taking it day by day and seeing what you can put together.
Well, thank you, Gino. Thanks for sharing your story with us. It's inspirational to hear how we can start in HPDE and track day, and you can advance all the way to IMSA racing. So thanks for sharing your story and some insight as well. Appreciate your time.
No worries. Thank you, guys.